knows all the best shows and where to dine. The hidden gems and the best known spots. Touring down the city, yeah, she walks a lot. She's Lila.
Hello and welcome to the inaugural edition of Welcome to New York, Lila's version, the first of many interviews, I hope, for this online travel blog that I've created from a person who loves New York, for people who love New York and go visit. And as I said, this is the inaugural edition of doing an interview, and I really started off strong and big with who I'm interviewing today. I'm interviewing Claire Saint Amant. She has written a book called Killer Story. She is also she's been a producer for 48 Hours and for 60 Minutes. And in my job that I have, I'm marketing manager for Northwest Insurance. And my boss, Mark, and I have interviewed her for one of our podcasts called Beyond the Policy. And I was so just amazed and encouraged and inspired by her story and by her book that I wanted to have her on as the first interviewee for the New York City travel blog that I created a couple years ago. And the tie-in is that, again, she was a producer for 48 Hours and for 60 Minutes, both of which are based in New York City. And I just thought it would be a great first interview. So welcome, Claire. I'm really glad to see you.
Thank you so much, Lila. It's great to be here, and I'm so proud to be your first guest.
Oh, thanks. Thanks a lot. I wanted to start off big, so here we go. So again, I mentioned your book, and I mentioned what you've done in the past, which led you to writing this book. So I'm going to hand the baton to you and let you run with it.
Well, thanks. I'll take it. So Killer Story, The Truth Behind True Crime Television is my memoir about my journey from local news to network television and working all the time in true crime. So I covered many of the major murder stories and trials, of the last decade. And I wanted to write this book while the stories were still fresh, while the cases were still relevant. And,
Definitely.
Also I just felt like a good story eventually gets told.
You're a great storyteller, too. You're a great storyteller in the book, in reading the book, but also I can tell from reading the book, you were a great storyteller to get what you needed for your job as a producer. I mean, you know how to, we were discussing this before the camera started rolling, you know how to lean in to people to talk their language. And so tell me about, and tell us about where you're from and what got you on this path, because it's a real interesting path.
So I'm from Katy, Texas. I grew up in Katy, home of the Tigers. And then I've been in Dallas for the last 15 years. So I went to Baylor University in Waco. So just been pretty big Texas girl my whole life. And then I actually went to the Peace Corps in Ukraine after college. Mm-hmm. And then I came back to Dallas, got married. And, I never expected to work in the national media.
Really? Never?
I mean,
you didn't see that?
I wanted to work for a major newspaper. That was really where I thought my reporting career would go. I was an English major. I was a journalism minor. I worked at the school paper. I've always been attracted to the written word.
Okay.
And so newspapers was really my plan A. I really felt like that was where I should be. And so I was in Dallas, so I wanted to work for the Dallas Morning News. That was the big paper, and it still is. And that was really where if I could have picked my path, that's what I would have done. But, life always has other plans. So I ended up getting an offer at People Newspapers in Dallas, which is a great chain of community newspapers and owned by D Magazine, which is a fabulous regional magazine. And I worked there and ended up finding the true crime beat just quite by accident. But I was doing all the reporting of a general assignment reporter. So I was doing real estate, I was doing city council meetings, school board meetings, and cops and courts. So
what were you looking for when you were looking on that true crime beat? Were you looking for what was like above the surface, like the big stories, or were you looking for a particular detail in when you would see do they call it like a police blotter?
Yeah,
is that what they call it?
That's what I was looking at initially, because we covered these certain zip codes and areas of town with People Newspapers. And so we would look at anything that happened, including crime, in that area.
Okay.
So I got those reports, some from the Dallas Police Department, some from, I think, University Park Police Department. They have their own police departments there. So, yeah, I was just looking at anything that was going on. I'm always looking for great stories. I'm always looking for something that piques my curiosity, where I start asking questions. I feel like if I am intrigued by it, other people will be too.
Definitely.
And so my first story on the crime beat was about the most robbed Subway in Dallas.
Really?
The most robbed Subway sandwich shop in Dallas. And I just couldn't believe it kept getting robbed over and over and over again. So then I got curious. I, did a Public Information Act request for all the Subways in our area and, which ones had crime reporting. And I realized this one was the most robbed. And it was right off of 75. Okay. And so I was trying to figure out, well, is it just like easy access? You can get on and off the freeway, so like a clean getaway. But guess what, Lila?
What?
It ended up being an inside job. Somebody,
really?
Yeah, someone working at the Subway was tipping off their, friend who was going and robbing it, but it was a racket. And
wow,
it really surprised me because I didn't see that coming.
Yes.
And it was the sort of twist in the criminal mind that opened up this whole world of true crime reporting to me. That was my first true crime story where I was like, wow, I didn't see that coming.
Wow. And that's so interesting, because when you were saying that a minute ago, I thought to myself, well, it must be either in a not so great neighborhood or in a really great neighborhood. Conversely, in other words, I figured it had something to do with location. Yes. Right? That's what you would think.
Yes.
But it had nothing to do with location. Wow.
Yeah. So that, really is part of the psychology of criminals and understanding why people do the things they do and how people think they're going to get away with it. So I didn't know then that I would eventually be covering murder stories and people who are faking home invasions and staging crime scenes and framing other people for murder and lying to the cops and doing all the things that the devilish mind can come up with.
Sounds like that's like a Wednesday for you, uncovering all of that. That's a lot. That's a lot to take in. And you, I just hear as you speak, when we interviewed you, a couple months ago, and also just reading in your book, you have this natural curiosity. I feel like that you look at something and you say, well, this is what it looks like on the surface, but I really feel like under the surface, there's a whole lot more there. And that's just so it's woven through your whole book of all your experiences and the stories that you covered and produced. So tell me about so you were at People Newspapers and you were covering different zip codes,
correct,
right? And then kind of what happened after that.
So I ended up getting an offer from Culture Map,
okay,
which was a daily news website that was started in Houston, and it was coming to Dallas in 2012. And so I had covered my first major true crime story at People newspapers and at D Magazine, which was the Episcopal School of Dallas sex scandal, as we called it. And that brought me to the civil courts, where a family was suing the school for the fact that their daughter had been sexually abused by a faculty member. And it was pretty just horrific case and really sad. And a lot of different layers there too, and ended up being a very large jury verdict that year. I think it was over $9 million against the school.
Wow, really?
So I had covered that trial and ended up doing a cover story for D Magazine back in 2011. And from there, got the attention of editors from Culture Map who were coming and looking for some troublemaking journalists to help with their news site. And so I ended up going over there as the managing editor of Culture Map Dallas and worked with some great journalists there. I think you know my friend Teresa Gubbins.
I sure do. I've known Teresa a really long time. I've known her since the mid-90s when I worked at the Met newspaper, which was around then, and she worked at the Morning News at that time. So, yeah, it sounds like we've both known her for a while.
Yeah, so she was one of my, good friends there and a senior editor, and really enjoyed her nose for news and getting to cover stories with like-minded journalists who wanted to sort of break convention and break news and do things.
She definitely does that. She always finds the hidden gems. So I can see the parallels there.
Yeah, so it was a great place to work, and I was there whenever I discovered this really bizarre case in Keller, Texas. And so we also had Culture Map Fort Worth, but this was a story of a woman who had faked a home invasion. She had staged the scene as though an intruder had been in her home. And then she called 911 breathless and said, "Oh my gosh, there's a man in the house. He shot my husband. I've been injured. Please send help." And, the cavalry came and they searched the scene and they had a lot of questions. And they felt like there hadn't been anyone else at the scene, that the killer was inside the house, right? And so it started down this twisted path trying to uncover the truth. And I ended up coming to the story when, amazingly, Tarrant County had offered this woman a plea deal where she would only serve about 9 years of her sentence, and it was going to be for deadly conduct and tampering with evidence.
Yeah.
And so that raised a bunch of red flags for me, and I wanted to know more. And so I ended up digging into her case and what this plea deal was and why she was getting a plea deal for murder. Yeah.
Deadly. I mean, I'd never heard of that until I read that in your book.
Yeah.
I don't even know what that is.
So it's supposed to be like you're reckless with a gun and unintentionally kill someone. So you have a gun, maybe you're cleaning it and you're drunk, or you're just not paying attention and it goes off and accidentally kills someone. That's called deadly conduct. Well, that wasn't at all the facts of the Michelle Williams case, which is the woman who had called 911, and she had basically shot her husband in cold blood as he was asleep in bed next to her. And then called 911 and, in between wiped everything down with bleach and tried to jimmy the lock and did all these strange things to really confuse investigators and take their, attention into a different direction. But it didn't work for too long because they eventually realized it had to be her. But she was able to get this sweetheart plea deal and this lifeline by kind of playing the damsel in distress. And, she claimed that she was pregnant with twins, and all of this was a lie, Lila. It was all lies.
So she was pretty diabolical.
She was. And I really got a taste for this super criminal who is defying all authority, who has this whole other narrative, who is so far beyond the norm that somehow people start to believe them. It's like with the Michelle Williams case, it seemed to be the more elaborate lies she told, the less likely she was to get caught. And she just became so bold with it. And they actually were agreeing that, because of this pregnancy, which wasn't real, she had Googled sonogram twins and printed out the picture. And, it was just complete complete fabrication.
So she's just this chaos of a person, chaos of a human being.
Yes.
And
had, committed murder and was about to get away with it. And so that ended up being the title of the story, Did Michelle Williams Get Away with Murder? And, I went into her history and her previous marriages and people who thought that they had barely escaped with their lives and things she had done, poisoned pets, dogs, killed fish. I know. It's pretty bad. So she, there was no one safe around Michelle Williams. So I ended up doing this big 3-part investigative series about her, about the plea deal, about the murder, about other deaths in her orbit that were ruled suicides. And to this day, she's never been charged in, but it's very suspicious in my opinion. And so I did this story and it became very big for Culture Map. And it also got the attention of Dateline on NBC, 2020 on ABC, and 48 Hours on CBS. And so I ended up going to work for 48 Hours initially as an on-air consultant, as the local reporter who had broken this story about Michelle Williams.
Okay.
And so she would eventually have her plea deal thrown out and have to go to trial and be found guilty of murder and sentenced to 60 years in prison. So it was a very satisfying end to her story in that she was finally held responsible for the death of her husband.
The punishment and the crime.
It did, yes. So it seems she'll never get out of prison, though she's trying very hard to create other, reasons, compassionate release, why she should be let out of prison. So I ended up doing another season of my podcast, Final Days on Earth, on the life and death of Greg Williams, her husband, and why, Michelle Williams continues to try to manipulate and control people, even from prison, which is pretty fascinating.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, you're really, with what you've been doing, you were, and we're going to get into this more, but how long did you work at 48 Hours? For how many years?
8 years.
So for those 8 years, really delving into people's just bizarre psyches and just, I'm sure, and let's elaborate on that. Just some of the, in reading the book, some of the stories that you came across, school shootings, a lot of spouse on spouse, really scary stuff, to say the least. Tell us about some more stories, like some more spouse on spouse stories that you came across that stood out.
Sure. So probably one of the biggest ones in the book, I talk about a murder for hire sting that went on in Houston. And so there were actually 2 doctors. It was Dr. Leon Jacob and Dr. Valerie McDaniel. And they were in Houston and they had previous relationships, previous entanglements. And they decided they wanted to get rid of their exes together. And so they thought they would hire a hitman to kill both of their exes. Have one, have an accident, stage a car accident, and then maybe a carjacking and have them killed. And then the other was just like a very disturbing sort of kidnapping plot.
Okay.
Neither one, had any real chance of succeeding. Thankfully, the person that they contacted that they thought would be a hitman went straight to the Houston Police Department.
Oh, good.
And said, these people are trying to hire me to commit murder. And as often happens in this case, the police were like, really? Is this really going on? And they were like, you got to wear a wire for us to believe this, because it does sound pretty unbelievable that people actually do this. But what they had done is they'd gone to who they perceived to be the most likely person in their circle to commit murder. And the reason they felt that was just because he was a military veteran.
Oh.
It's like, well, you were a soldier, you carried a gun, possibly you would commit murder. It's bonkers.
Wow.
So he was not going to commit murder.
What a weird line of thinking. What a terrible line of thinking.
Well, there's really no logic,
Right.
when you're talking about these types of thoughts, when you're talking about murder and you're trying to get someone to commit murder for money. It's the very rare person indeed, thankfully, that would actually do this. But most people they will go to whoever they think, they don't want to go too far afield. They want to have some connection to this person.
Oh,
So they
okay.
try to look in their own circle, and they look for anyone that they know has a criminal record or has handled guns. And so it ended up being this young man who'd been in the military, and he did have some brushes with the law. So, but he was not a killer. He was not going to be an assassin.
Thank goodness.
Yes, thank goodness indeed.
Wow.
So he ended up going to the cops. They put a wire on him, and he goes undercover, and then even introduces undercover Houston police officer to this couple as the actual trigger man. He was like, "Look, this job's this is too much heat for me. Like, I got to bring someone else in."
Uh-huh.
And Houston police helped him, coached him on how to phrase that and how to bring this other person in, but it worked. And they actually go through with these fake murders.
Okay.
So they use like Hollywood makeup. They pretend. Oh yeah, they go full on.
Oh my gosh.
They fake the bullet wounds. And they have text messages the whole time, and they end up, they tell them at every step, like, okay, now, like, we have them tied up, we have them this, and they're making sure that they're still saying, kill them. Because this is all, it's all for the case, right? So this is for the charges, and they have to prove intent, and that it wasn't just talk, and so it ends up, both of these people are fake killed in this whole sting, and then it comes to light whenever they're arrested, that no one was killed, that it was all a sting. So it's a fascinating, very disturbing story. It's got a lot of twists and turns that I won't get into here. But they're in the book, and it was a really fascinating and strange story to try to tell for television, and to talk to all these different people, the undercover cop, the would-be assassin, the mastermind of the whole thing, Dr. Leon Jacob, and try to get everyone to give interviews, which they ultimately did.
Wow, that's a lot of it, digging down, and again going into the psyche of people and really realizing there are people out there like that. And that's got to be disheartening.
It is.
And it is discouraging at times.
It is. It is very disturbing to think that these people walk among us.
Right. That they walk among us.
Yeah.
So, you started at 48 hours, yes. And I'm going to assume you were also pursued by the other two shows that you mentioned, but 48 hours, that was the one that most agreed with you.
Yes.
Obviously.
Yeah. I give all the dirt in my book, but yes, I felt like CBS was the honest broker there, and that they really wanted to work with me to tell the story of Michelle Williams and not just take the story from me, which so often happens to the local reporter who does a lot of great investigative legwork on a murder case. The big shows will just take that story
from right under you.
Yeah.
But there were what you spoke about in the book. There were ways that you protected yourself. There were a multitude of ways that you would protect yourself with stories. And I thought that was really clever and really forward thinking, because you did that at the beginning.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it's an interesting world in journalism, and I learned pretty early on that stories get stolen all the time.
Oh.
And when I was a freelancer, I would pitch stories to big publications, and sometimes, they would say, "Yeah, let's, write that one for us." And I would. Other times I would pitch them story ideas, and they'd be like, "Oh, none of these are a fit." And then I would see their byline with the story that I had pitched show up. And this was really before social media was like, let's put people on blast. So I felt just total, and here I was starting out, I felt just totally helpless. Like I couldn't, what was I going to do? Call out this big time editor for stealing the story from me, who no one's ever heard of before. Yeah, I felt like I had no recourse. And so it made me smarter, and it made me more determined to own these stories. And that's really a lot of what's behind Killer Story, writing my own memoir about true crime television, because I wanted to tell it in an unfiltered way and really own the narrative of what it's like to work in true crime television Lila, no one has written a book like this. No one.
Really?
There's
no one
never
else
been.
has?
No, never been a producer from Dateline to write a book like this. Never been a producer from 2020, and certainly not one from 48 Hours. So
Wow.
it's
Okay.
I'm the first, and it's scary to put your neck out there. It's scary to do something that's never been done before. But I believe that this is a story that deserves to be told, and that people who watch true crime television, I don't think they'll watch their favorite show the same way again once they've read this book.
First of all, I've said wow more times than I can count so far today, just not even 30 minutes in. Secondly, it's as I was reading, you said sticking your neck out writing this book. As I was reading the book, I read it about a month or so ago, I thought that throughout the book. Wow, she's really revealing some things here and putting herself out there, giving out this information and walking us through what she's gone through here. Now, again, having you as my inaugural guest to interview for my New York City-based travel blog, let's kind of go to that.
Yeah.
So, as I mentioned at the beginning, and for those following along, you can figure out 48 Hours and 60 Minutes are based in New York City. That's where that's major media market. My dog knows that, right? But in the book you mentioned, and as you said earlier, you're from Katy. You went to Baylor. You live here in the DFW Metroplex. So having a New York City address was not something on your to-do list?
It wasn't. I definitely flirted with the idea at times, but for me, I used to say I commuted to Manhattan.
Okay.
I commuted from Dallas, and so that was a great fit for me. I loved to go to New York. I loved to stay in a hotel. I loved to go to the broadcast center for a week, the CBS broadcast center, and go to a screening, look at cuts, help, put the show together and think about marketing, social media, all the things that you have to do to get people to know that you have a new episode of your show out. And so that was very novel to me, to be in the city, to run in Central Park, to go.
Yeah, you're a big runner.
Big runner, yes. So it was amazing. And I certainly had those moments where I couldn't believe that I was there. I just, to think that I started out at People newspapers, and 4 years later I was working for CBS News. It was hard to say that there's a straight line there, but it was true crime that got me there.
Yeah, I can see as you're talking that when you said it was kind of surreal and it was, wow, this is really unbelievable, that being in that experience, you had stars in your eyes. Even, I mean, you earned it and you paved the way and you were taking a path that wasn't a common path, but still you have stars in your eyes. And a lot of people, you mentioned this in the book, I say a lot, some of your colleagues were surprised that having a New York City address was not on your to-do list.
Yeah.
But you also, being a Texan, being a native Texan, going to college at Baylor, and then living in Texas. I mean, that was where you were most comfortable, and that's what you enjoyed so much. Now you were in the Peace Corps, and tell us about that and how that. I really feel like that in people's careers, I've seen it in mine. Things that we've done when we were younger fed into things that the next stepping stones, and even things we did older, even though maybe some of those stepping stones didn't get fit into. So tell us about the Peace Corps and then how that helped you with being a producer in true crime.
Sure. I left college and wanted to go have a grand adventure. I wanted to do something that, I'd never done before, and to live in a new place and to have all these new experiences. And so the Peace Corps was a great place to do that. And so I was a foreign language teacher, with English being the foreign language.
Oh, okay.
In Ukraine.
Oh, in Ukraine?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
of all places. And I had never even been to Western Europe, much less Eastern Europe, whenever I learned that Ukraine was the country assignment.
Oh, wow.
So it was pretty unusual to think that I was going to be living in a place I'd never even thought to look up on a map before at the time. And, but I quickly learned about Ukraine and studied the history and the language and, learned the alphabet on flashcards before I went.
That's
So,
interesting.
yeah, like, it's a phonetic language, Ukrainian. So if you learn
Okay.
how to pronounce each letter, you can speak, even if you don't know what you're saying, you can read.
Oh, okay.
So I could read, and people would think that I was speaking Ukrainian, but I was just using the knowledge of the alphabet. So it was totally full, like, immersion into Ukrainian. And I lived with a host family, and I had to learn the language from the alphabet up, and eventually became fluent and was able to live on my own and taught in a village school, and just had an incredible experience, a cultural exchange, made some really wonderful friends that I'm still in touch with today. And of course, Ukraine is now very much in the news, and so I've tried to help in any way that I can my friends over there. There's lots of really great returned Peace Corps volunteer programs. One of them is called Ukrainian Action. And so we find ways to help people in Ukraine through lots of different donations and medical supplies and technology.
That's great.
Things like
That's
that.
so great.
Yeah.
Well, I really feel like you have such tenacity in reading throughout the book, and I really urge everyone watching this to get a copy of the book, Killer Story, and because you have such tenacity in delving deep into the stories that you've uncovered and that you produced, not only for 48 hours, but also for 60 minutes. And we've got to wrap it up here in just a minute, but I'm going to, again, give you the baton to talk about the book in about a 1-minute capsule. And I really hope that all of our viewers will take a minute to go to their local bookstore, go on Amazon, and get a copy of Killer Story.
Thank you so much, Lila. Yes, so this book will take audiences where they've never gone before. And I really think that the story behind these murder cases is often just as twisted and bizarre as the crimes themselves. So I hope that everyone out there enjoys this book, and you can find me on social media and tell me what you think of it. It's been a labor of love to write this and to put myself out there with a memoir and talk not only about what it was like to work in true crime television, but what it meant for me as a newlywed, as a young mom. All of these things happened to me as my career was building. And it was definitely an interesting time in my life trying to figure out, how to navigate all these new circumstances. So, you throw murder in there and everything just gets more interesting. So I think,
to say the least, interesting with big quotes around it. It's a true adventure reading the book and seeing everything, the path that you took and the things that you uncovered. And again, I'm going to use the word again, tenacity, that you had to really get to the nitty-gritty of some of these murders and these cases. And so, Claire, I really appreciate you coming on here with me today. Claire Sanama, wanted to make sure I pronounced it right.
You got it.
And again, the name of the book, it's called, you can see in the front of the screen, Killer Story. You can get it at your local bookstore. I bought a copy at Barnes & Noble, or you can get it on Amazon. Thanks again, Claire, and good luck.
Thank you, Lila.